They had a word for me. Everyone agreed on it. Family, teachers, colleagues, even people who barely knew me. The word was lazy. And for a long time, I believed them. Because what else do you believe when everyone around you is saying the same thing with such certainty? I was the kid who could not finish homework. Not because I did not understand it, because sitting down to start it felt like trying to lift something that weighed more than my entire body. I would sit at my desk for 2 hours and produce nothing. Not because I was watching something or thinking about something else, I was just sitting there, paralyzed, watching the time pass and hating myself for every minute of it. My mother would knock on the door and ask if I was done. I would say, "Almost." I had not started. I don't know why I said almost. I think I was trying to protect both of us from the truth. In school, my teachers wrote the same thing on every report. Has potential but does not apply himself. I read those words so many times they started to feel like my actual name. The worst part was not the judgment from other people. The worst part was that I agreed with it. I looked at everyone else functioning normally and I thought, what is wrong with me? Why can they do this and I cannot? I tried everything. Schedules, alarms, promises to myself, rewards if I finished, punishments if I didn't. None of it worked, and every failure made the next attempt harder because now there was more evidence that I was exactly what they said I was. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had built an entire identity around being the person who never followed through. I stopped starting things because not starting felt less painful than starting and failing again. I got very good at disappearing, canceling plans before I could be seen not delivering on them, staying quiet in meetings so no one would ask me to do something I was terrified I could not finish. A colleague said it once in a meeting, casually. The way people say things they do not realize are weapons. He said, "We all know this one needs a push to get going." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I went home and did not get out of bed properly for 4 days. 4 days in bed, not sleeping the whole time, just lying there with this weight on my chest that I didn't have a name for yet, eating almost nothing, watching the light change in the room from morning to afternoon to dark, and then morning again. On the 5th day, I got up and went back to work and told everyone I had been sick, which was true. I just didn't know yet what I was sick with. The moment things started to shift was not dramatic. It was a conversation with a doctor who asked me a list of questions I had never been asked before, not about my productivity, about my inner experience, about what it felt like inside on a normal day. I answered the questions honestly for the first time in my life, and she looked at me afterward and said, "What you're describing is not laziness. It has a name, and it is very treatable." I sat in that office and I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not from sadness exactly, from the specific relief of having something that had been unnamed for 20 years finally get a name. The name was depression. Chronic, low-grade, undiagnosed for most of my life. Not the dramatic version people imagine, the quiet version. The version that looks from the outside exactly like someone who simply cannot be bothered. I want you to understand what that felt like to hear. I had spent 20 years believing I was fundamentally flawed, that there was something broken in my character, and in one conversation, I found out it wasn't my character, it was my chemistry. Treatment was not a magic switch. I want to be honest about that. There were months of trying things that didn't work, adjustments, setbacks, days that still felt like walking through concrete. But slowly, something lifted. Not all at once. The way dawn doesn't arrive in one moment. It arrives in degrees, each one so small you almost can't measure it, until suddenly you realize it's light. The first time I sat down to do something difficult and just did it without the paralysis, without the 2 hours of self-loathing before the first sentence, I stopped, and I just noticed it. I noticed the absence of the weight. I started telling people, not everyone, but the ones who mattered. And some of them cried because they had spent years being frustrated with me, and they had not known either. The frustration turned into something else when the truth arrived. My mother sat with me for a long time after I told her. She didn't say much for a while. Then she said, "I wish I had known. I thought you were choosing not to try.
I didn't know you were fighting something I couldn't see." That sentence did something important. It didn't erase the years of being called lazy, but it put them in a different container. The people who labeled me were not cruel. They were looking at a drowning person and diagnosing bad swimming technique. I went back to some of the things I had abandoned, slowly, without pressure, just to see what they felt like now. And some of them, things I had told myself I was just not capable of, turned out to be things I was actually good at. There's a specific grief in discovering your potential after years of believing you had none, because you can't get the years back. You can only stand where you are and decide what to do from here. I decided to do something from here. Not everything, not dramatically, just the next thing, and then the next thing after that. Small and consistent, and without the weight that used to make every small thing feel enormous. I think about all the people sitting in classrooms right now being told they are not applying themselves. All the people in offices being quietly written off as difficult or unreliable. All the people lying in bed unable to explain to themselves or anyone else why getting up feels impossible. I want you to understand what I am describing. What you are experiencing is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is something real that has a name, and help exists, and you deserve to find it. They called me lazy for 20 years, and I was the furthest thing from lazy. I was working harder than anyone around me just to appear to be doing nothing, treading water with everything I had just to stay at the surface. That's not laziness. That's survival. And surviving that long, alone, without even knowing what you were surviving, that's one of the hardest things a person can do.